Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Interest Timeout, where hopefully you take a break out of your busy schedules to find a video that's worth of interest. Today, I'm going to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. I've been in the leadership and training and development industry for since the early 1990s. So I've had the joy of working with and helping, over half a million leaders around the world make their lives better for themselves and for the companies they work for and the people they work with. And I've been kind of thinking about different topics to get into. And the one that I'm going to get into today is about a logical fallacy. And there are many that we have where we, because of our thinking patterns, our biases, our life experiences, and the we as byproducts of environment and association that we have. One of the things that we talk about in one book called Crucial Conversations is a great work on this. Another one by another person I've had the joy of working with as well has written a book about conversational capacity. And excellent reads, both of them. I encourage you to get those books if you so desire to get into the aspect of how to have dialogue with people or to achieve dialogue. Now, dialogue is the sort of highest version of a conversation between people. Instead of having a discussion where people are shooting off words to one another while one person is attempting to look like that they are listening, they're actually thinking about what to respond to the other person rather than taking a step back in their thinking and listen to understand. And this is something that I've been working on for quite some time personally. And just recently, this is now January 2026. So everyone got together for the holidays. And throughout my life, there have been wonderful opportunities to have really in depth conversations about anything. And of course, when you bring family members together that haven't seen each other for quite some time, yeah, it's going to get kind of messy sometimes because conversational capacity is fine when you're talking about simple topics like, does anybody want any gravy with their turkey? Or would you like some jam on it instead? Those are simple topics. But when you get into what type of turkeys or going into that sort of a line that is crossed, and for different people, that line that is usually not visible, it's more invisible in our brains, trigger us when it gets into an area where we are have a strong, perhaps a different opinion about. And so what we're going to get into today is part of that. I'm going to do quite a few different topics that are related to this. Actually, I'm going to do one also on psychological safety at some point. But anyway, the one we're going to be concentrating on today is the straw man. Okay, so let's get started on that one. I have this nice little graphic to help illustrate it, but when we think about if I would create a title for this one, I would call it Beware the Straw Man at Work. Or, in other words, the straw man would be words that distort to destroy a conversation. Okay, so let's say, for example, that you're presented with a strong argument at work or even at home, getting together for the holidays, especially an argument or a statement that challenges your ideas or your decisions. It can be comfortable, it could be uncomfortable. But in many situations, when it does challenge something that you believe in strongly, you become uncomfortable. Now, I'm actually thinking about doing a video about this specifically about what happens to our brains when we become uncomfortable. Has a lot to do with neuroscience and also our biological reactions because normally as human beings, we are wired for survival. Normally, like for example, if you were to walk down a forest path all by yourself, enjoying wonderful nature, right? Birds are singing, the weather's nice, and you're just enjoying a nice hike. in a forest. You're probably taking maybe a path or you're creating your own path and you hear a strange sound. Okay. Not a lot of people are going to get excited by that sound. Well, that excitement that you might feel is one of survival because your body is trying to decide, should I fight or flight in that situation? Should I fight the sound, which might be a crazy person trying to hurt me or kill me? Or it could be an animal that I need to protect myself from. So our survival instinct usually by default kicks in unless we are try to think a bit more cerebrally, slow down our reaction to think more in that situation. Now, I don't naturally want you to over facilitate your thinking process if a bear is charging towards you. That's not what I'm thinking of. Okay, so let's getting back to this idea about beware the straw man or distort to destroy. Anyway, when we become uncomfortable, responding well to that situation requires reflection, data, facts, or follow up conversations. But let's say you're at work and you're in a meeting or a real time discussion, perhaps online in an online meeting. You usually do not have the luxury of time because your brain automatically sorts information. Usually, someone says or does something, especially might say something that challenges your thinking. And if you're not in charge of the way you think or react in that situation, your brain will immediately go to a reaction, and that reaction is a feeling. But if you slow down that process from what someone says or does something like, I disagree with you completely, or even worse, they might say something like, that's a stupid thing to say. Okay, you've been challenged. Okay, normally our reaction, if we are not trained to be mindful in that situation, being aware of how our body might be reacting in that situation, we might actually think, well, oh yeah, well, well, you're stupid too. We might react according to that feeling because basically someone says or does something, then we respond with a feeling. But what happens between that is that, according to Crucial Conversations, and this is true in psychology, is that our brain tells a story that produces a feeling. And if we're not in charge of that story that we are telling ourselves, then we're going to react in a negative way. One of the authors of the Crucial Conversations book talks about a personal story where he had with his wife. Encourage you to read that. Anyway, so we usually in the workplace, getting back to that, we don't have that luxury of time. So when we think about that situation, when it happens during a meeting or discussion with anyone or a team, admitting I'm not sure or I need to think about that can feel quite risky, particularly in environments where confidence is rewarded. Because often in the workplace, people want people who are confident, right? So that's where the temptation of the straw man fallacy creeps in. All right, something to think about. So instead of responding to the real argument, it can be tempting to respond to a simpler, weaker version of it. One that is perhaps easier to dismiss quickly. Something to think about. Think about situations where that has happened to you. In fact, you can put some comments in the discussion below if you want to as well. What are some examples of this? So to kind of get into this a little bit more, let's go into like the workplace straw man. So let's think of it this way. Rather than addressing a colleague's actual proposal, you mentally create a fake version of it. And I'll give you some examples in a moment. You exaggerate what they say, or you oversimplify it, or frame it in the worst possible light. That's the straw man. So maybe a teammate suggests something like adjusting deadlines to improve quality on a project that you're working on. And you respond as if they're proposing to you to slow down the entire organization or your business unit or your team and slow down things to a halt. That's one example of the straw man. Or someone raises concerns about a process that your team is following. And then you reply as if they're attacking your leadership or the leadership of the organization, or you're refusing accountability in that situation. Now you have something easy to argue against, which is the straw man. You push back confidently, and you may even look decisive in that moment. But just like arguing against a straw figure, you haven't actually addressed what the other person has even said. Okay, it may feel productive to you in that situation, but nothing has really been resolved. Why, when we think about why the straw man in these situations and in these meetings might hurt the teams. Okay, so when we are attacking a distorted version of even, giving you another example here, attacking a distorted version of a colleague's idea, the original concern remains unanswered. Trust will erode because that person feels misunderstood, naturally. Who wouldn't, right? So when you use the straw man, you weaken your own credibility when others notice the mismatch in that situation. If the colleague or even the observers in that particular meeting, for example, point out that you did not respond to the actual argument or difference of opinion, the discussion will then shift. So instead of appearing confident, you may appear defensive or dismissive. Thomas Kilmann, wonderful conflict model, which I encourage you to look up online, is a fantastic example of how we might reply strategically to different situations where we might avoid it, dismiss it, play along with other people's points of view to save time or perhaps save face in a situation, become competitive and fight for your point of view, which is fine to do in certain situations, or work towards a collaborative or compromise in a situation as well. So you're trying to find that win-win. So over time, if you use the straw man, this discourages honest input and has a huge impact on psychological safety. Now, there is an emotional factor to this as well that I mentioned earlier. Straw man arguments are especially tempting when discussions become emotional or high stake oriented, especially when you talk about performance reviews, for example, restructuring decisions, budget cuts, DEI initiatives, or strategic changes to what's happening within an organization or within a team. Change initiatives that are being done as well. In these moments, it's easy to stop engaging with ideas and start reacting to people. Yes, reacting, not proacting, proactive, but actually reacting to people. You would rather win the exchange or run away from it. So winning, in one example, winning the exchange can begin to matter more than understanding what the issue even is. The goal becomes looking right to you rather than getting it right. Okay, so let me repeat that. The goal becomes looking right rather than getting it right. Now, the mindset that damages workplace culture is that when debate becomes about victory instead of clarity and a willingness to understand other people's point of view, not approve it, but willingness to understand, collaboration and psychological safety will suffer. So let's consider how the straw man fallacy works in a workplace as another example. So it typically follows this pattern. Person A will state a position or raise a concern. Person B presents a distorted or exaggerated version of that position, implying it's the same as the original. Person B attacks the distorted version and acts as if the original concern has been invalidated. Interesting. In reality, the original idea was never addressed or tried to understand. People sometimes in these situations fail to listen to understand. The key takeaway for professionals in our lives is that if you care about good ideas in strong teams and effective decision making, resist the urge to argue against what's easy instead of what's true. One good way of doing this is asking clarifying questions. Say, oh, could you explain this in a different way? I'm not sure I said it or understood it in a way that you intended. Could you repeat what you said, please? Or repeat back what they said from what you thought you heard and say, is this the best way for me to understand what you're talking about? So respond to what was actually said. Separate people from their ideas, because very often we as human beings judge people's behavior, and sometimes we put the person into the behavior as well. When we're giving feedback to people, we should always give feedback on the behavior, not the person. Okay? We often put them together. So in the workplace, though, progress comes not from defeating our colleagues in a conversation. And I've worked with people that want to do that, but from honestly engaging with the arguments and understanding the arguments that they are making. Okay. So here's a couple of examples that I pulled from some of my experiences, and I changed the names of some of these people. It's like one person would say, I don't understand why Maya has pulled back from collaborating with us. And then Laura would say quietly, as the conference room emptied after a weekly team meeting, mentioned that to a colleague. Another example was that Ben had a theory, and it centered upon Alex. When Alex joined the department earlier in the quarter of the year, things subtly changed in the team dynamics. Laura and Ben had always worked closely with most of the team, but now the group felt divided. Maya, especially, had become distant and withdrawn during team meetings. She doesn't like working with Alex, Ben said. And then she avoids us when we're assigned to projects with him. After the discussing with their situation with their manager, Laura and Ben decided the best approach was to address it professionally and give Maya a chance to explain her thinking. They caught up with her the next morning near the break room. Maya, Laura began, we've noticed that you've stepped back from collaborating with us lately. We want to check in and understand what you think is going on. Maya folds her arms. You've already made your priorities clear. Interesting, she said. If you want to align yourselves with Alex, that's your decision. I'll just focus on working with other people from now on. Now, before they could respond, Maya turns away and walks away, leaving Laura and Ben confused about how the conversation had gone off track so quickly. What happened in this situation? Maya was responding to what she thought Laura and Ben believed, not to anything that they had actually said. Strawman alert. Laura and Ben never claimed they preferred Alex over Maya, nor did they say that they wanted to exclude her from collaboration. Their only stated position was their continued professional interaction with a new team member. Maya, however, interpreted that behavior as a deliberate choice against her. She formed a distorted version of their position, believing they had chosen sides, and reacted to that belief by disengaging entirely from team meetings. Sound familiar, right? Rather than addressing a real disagreement, Maya was responding to an assumption. This is a classic example of the straw man logical fallacy. Now, when we kind of think about why this matters at work and in life in general, in professional environments, at home, with our friends, straw man thinking often shows up as assuming what other people intend to do, the stories we tell ourselves, instead of seeking clarification. So, whenever you feel yourself being uncomfortable in a situation like this, don't assume their intent. Question it. Even ask them. Because if you don't ask, then it will reinforce your belief. Another thing to do is to treat neutral actions as value judgments. That's enough said about that. Responding emotionally to conclusions that no one actually stated. These misunderstandings can damage trust, collaboration, and team performance. So we don't want to argue against the assumptions about what other people believe. We want to clarify positions before reacting and responding and address the real ideas, not the imagined ones. When colleagues feel accurately understood, productive dialogue becomes very, very possible, and teams can resolve conflicts without unnecessary friction. So, beware the straw man. Don't distort it. Don't go into that knee-jerk reaction of feeling and assuming something. Clarify it. Listen to understand. Be curious about the other person's point of view and understand it. You don't need to approve it. That's another thing. That's all I'm going to share with you today. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure and like and subscribe if you so desire. We will have more content about these subjects and more in other videos. Take care, everyone. All the best.